The vast expanse of the Miller Ranch lay silent under the watchful gaze of a million stars, an inky black canvas punctuated by the distant, rhythmic lowing of cattle. Outside Van Horn, Texas, the wind whispered secrets through the mesquite, the only sound breaking the profound stillness of the dead of night. It was a silence that spoke of peace, of slumber, of a world momentarily at rest. But tonight, that peace was about to be shattered. From the dusty, unpaved road that wound its way to the corrals, a dark, beat-up pickup truck emerged from the gloom. Its headlights were extinguished, casting it as a phantom vehicle creeping through the darkness. It moved with a deliberate slowness, a predatory stealth that spoke volumes of its occupants' intentions. The truck finally idled to a stop, its engine a barely audible rumble just out of sight of the main ranch house. Two figures, large and shadowy against the faint starlight, emerged from the cabin. They moved with a practiced ease, their forms melting into the deeper shadows of the corral fences. In their hands, glinting dully, were heavy-duty bolt cutters. This was clearly not their first rodeo, not their first night under the cover of darkness, seeking to lay claim to what was not theirs. One of them, a man whose bulk was evident even in the low light, leaned in close to his accomplice. His voice, a low, guttural whisper, carried on the wind. "All right, let's get this done. Old Man Miller ain't around to stop us anymore." A cold, ugly grin stretched across his face, a stark contrast to the quiet beauty of the night. This was Jed, a name that would soon be etched into the memory of this specific night. As the words hung in the air, a new sound cut through the silence, sharper than the wind, calmer than the Rustlers' whispers, yet infinitely more commanding. From the deep shadows of the barn, a voice, steady and unwavering, sliced through the night. "He's not, but I am." Jed and his partner froze, their movements arrested mid-stride, their heads snapped up, eyes darting frantically into the oppressive darkness around them. They saw nothing, only the familiar shapes of the barn, the corrals, and the endless Texas sky. A prickle of unease, cold and unwelcome, began to crawl up their spines. The voice spoke again, closer this time, its tone carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "You picked the wrong night, boys, and the wrong ranch." A brief, tense silence descended, heavier than before. The rustlers exchanged nervous glances, their bravado evaporating like morning dew. Then, a sharp, deafening crack of a rifle shot tore through the night. It wasn't aimed at them, not directly, but the bullet impacted the dusty ground just inches from Jed's feet, sending a plume of dirt and small stones scattering. Both men jumped, a yelp escaping Jed's partner. "Who's there? Show yourself!" Jed shouted, his voice a ragged mix of fear and aggression, trying to reclaim some semblance of control. The calm voice replied, its cadence chillingly deliberate. "Justice, Jed! Quicker than you expect." Suddenly, the truck's engine, which had been idling almost imperceptibly, sputtered, coughed, and then died with a final metallic sigh. Simultaneously, a series of distinct hissing sounds filled the air as the truck's tires began to deflate, one by one, with an unnerving rapidity. The rustlers were stranded, their escape vehicle now a dead weight of metal and rubber. The unseen presence seemed to pull back, the perspective widening. The two men were now isolated, figures dwarfed by the vast, unforgiving landscape, trapped in the inescapable darkness. Their options had vanished as quickly as the light in their truck's engine. Before we dive deeper into how this ex-Navy SEAL protected his family's legacy, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. John Miller, the narrator, now takes us back, away from that tense, starlit confrontation, to the sun-drenched days of his childhood on the Miller Ranch. This sprawling cattle operation, nestled near the rugged beauty of Van Horn, Texas, was more than just land and livestock. It was the crucible where his identity was forged. He paints a vivid picture of the arid West Texas landscape, the endless, impossibly vast skies that stretched from horizon to horizon, a canvas of ever-changing blues and fiery sunsets, the distinctive red dirt that clung to everything, a testament to the ancient earth, and the hardy, tenacious mesquite trees, their gnarled branches defying the harsh conditions, symbols of resilience in a land that demanded it. His father, a man cast from the same tough, unyielding mold as the land itself, stood at the heart of these memories. A third-generation rancher, His father was a figure of quiet strength and unwavering principles. He was tough, certainly, but always fair, his decisions guided by an innate sense of justice and practicality. He instilled in John everything about the land, teaching him to read the subtle signs of the weather, to understand the intricate rhythms of the cattle, and to respect the delicate balance of the ecosystem they were a part of. More profoundly, he taught John what it truly meant to be a miller, a name synonymous with hard work, unimpeachable honesty, and an unwavering commitment to protecting what was theirs, whether it be the land, the herd, or the family's honor. His life was a living testament to these values, a constant, unspoken lesson for his son. John recounts the relentless, yet deeply satisfying, daily routine that defined their lives. Waking before dawn, often with the first blush of light painting the eastern sky, they would begin the day's arduous tasks. Mending fences, a never-ending chore in such a vast territory, was a meditation in patience and precision. Herding cattle across miles of open range, a dance between man, horse, and beast, demanded skill and an intuitive understanding of animal behavior. Repairing equipment, from bulky tractors to worn-out windmills, required ingenuity and a deep knowledge of mechanics. It was a life steeped in physical labor, demanding every ounce of strength and endurance, yet it fostered a profound connection to the land and the animals that sustained them. It was a life that carved character, day by day, under the unrelenting Texas sun. The community of Van Horn itself was a character in John's narrative, a small, close-knit town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and a handshake was considered as binding and trustworthy as any legal contract. Here, reputations were built over generations, and trust was a currency more valuable than gold. John's relationship with his father, though marked by few overt expressions of emotion, was deep and foundational. His father was a man of few words, but every lesson he imparted was profound, etched into John's memory not just by repetition, but by example. He taught John to shoot straight, not just with a rifle, but in life, to face challenges directly and honestly. He taught him to ride hard, to embrace the thrill and discipline of being astride a powerful animal, navigating the rugged terrain. And perhaps most importantly, he taught him never to back down from a bully, a lesson that resonated deeply and would prove crucial in the years to come. It is here, in these formative years, that John introduces Jed, not yet the outright villain of the current night, but a kid from a neighboring, less successful ranch. Jed's family had always struggled, their land less fertile, their herd smaller, their luck seemingly always running thin, and Jed himself, even as a boy, always seemed to be looking for the easy way out, a shortcut to success, perpetually seeking to cut corners. There was always a subtle tension between the Miller and Jed's family, a sense of Jed wanting what others had without putting in the necessary work. John distinctly remembers Jed eyeing their prize cattle, not with admiration for their quality, but with a look that was something else entirely, something covetous, a hunger for what was not his. Even then, an undercurrent of envy and resentment simmered beneath Jed's seemingly casual demeanor, a premonition of the conflict that would one day erupt. John now delves into specific memories, sharp and clear, that highlight Jed's developing character and the growing, almost imperceptible fractures that were forming between their two families, and especially between the two boys. These weren't grand, dramatic confrontations, but rather a series of small, telling incidents that, in retrospect, painted a clear picture of the man Jed would become. He vividly recalls a particular time when he and Jed were teenagers, still young enough for their paths to cross with some regularity, yet old enough for their personalities to diverge sharply. It was during a particularly tough season for Jed's family, and John's father, ever the generous and community-minded rancher, had offered Jed some work on the Miller Ranch. The task was crucial, mending a long stretch of fence line that bordered the open range, an essential barrier to keep their valuable cattle from straying. John remembers his father's instructions to Jed being clear, emphasizing the importance of sturdy posts, taut, heavy-gauge wire, and secure fastenings. Yet, when John went to check on Jed's progress, he found him cutting corners, using flimsy, lighter-gauge wire where stronger material was needed, and rushing the job, barely sinking the posts deep enough. The inevitable happened. A few weeks later, a section of that very fence gave way, and several head of prime Miller cattle wandered off, causing a frantic day of searching and retrieval, John's father, instead of erupting in anger, which he had every right to do, had calmly taken Jed back to the broken fence. He didn't yell, he simply, methodically, showed Jed the right way to mend it, explaining the long-term consequences of shoddy work. It was a lesson delivered with quiet authority, but it was also a subtle humiliation for Jed, who just grumbled under his breath, his face dark with resentment, and walked away, leaving John's father to redo much of the work himself. The incident left a lingering bad taste, a sense of Jed's unwillingness to commit to honest, thorough labor. Another memory surfaces, this one from the annual county fair, a highlight of the year for the local community. John's father had proudly entered his prize bull, a magnificent beast of impeccable lineage, and to no one's surprise, it had won the coveted blue ribbon. The Miller family beamed with pride, but Jed was there too, lurking on the periphery of the celebration. John distinctly remembers Jed's snide remarks, whispered just loud enough to be overheard. "Some people just get lucky," he'd muttered, his eyes narrowed, devoid of any genuine congratulations. "It's easy when you start with everything." It wasn't a direct insult, but the implication was clear. Jed believed the Miller's success was due to inherited privilege, not hard work or skill. It was a bitter, envious observation that revealed the deep-seated resentment festering within him, a belief that the world wasn't fair and that others' achievements somehow diminished his own. John also recalls a pattern of behavior that was more insidious. Jed constantly tried to borrow money from his father, often under the guise of needing to buy feed or repair equipment. His father, always generous to a fault, especially with struggling neighbors, would often lend the money. But more often than not, Jed wouldn't pay it back on time, or sometimes not at all. John's father, out of kindness and a desire to avoid confrontation, would often let it slide. But John, even as a young man, saw the pattern emerging. Jed was taking advantage of his father's good nature, mistaking generosity for weakness. The biggest, most painful fracture in their relationship, however, came when John made the life-altering decision to join the Navy, specifically to become a SEAL. It was a choice born of a desire to serve, to challenge himself, and to see the world beyond the dusty confines of West Texas. But Jed saw it differently. He openly mocked John, his words laced with a venomous mix of disdain and jealousy. He accused John of running away from ranch life, of being a city boy wannabe who couldn't handle the realities of the land. He even went so far as to spread rumors in town, suggesting that John wasn't capable of managing the ranch, that he was abandoning his responsibilities. These rumors, coming from someone who had grown up alongside him, someone who knew the ranch as well as he did, hurt John deeply. It felt like a betrayal, a deliberate attempt to undermine his reputation and his connection to the land he loved. These incidents, seemingly small and isolated at the time, accumulated over the years, like grains of sand building into a dune. They weren't just random acts. They were clear indicators of Jed's character, his envy, his willingness to take advantage of others, his deep-seated bitterness at what he perceived as the Millers' unearned prosperity. The initial rustling attempt, that brazen act of theft under the cover of darkness, wasn't just a random crime. It was the culmination of years of Jed's resentment boiling over, a desperate, bitter move by a man who felt perpetually short-changed and was finally ready to take what he believed he was owed, by force if necessary. John now recounts the most difficult period of his life, the slow, agonizing decline of his father's health. His father, a man who had always seemed as indomitable as the West Texas landscape itself, slowly, relentlessly, succumbed to a long and debilitating illness. The strength that had defined him, the unwavering resolve, began to ebb away, leaving a vulnerability John had never before witnessed. During this profoundly difficult time, a period of immense emotional strain for John and his family, Jed began to show up more often at the Miller Ranch. Ostensibly, his visits were framed as acts of neighborly kindness, offers to help out during their time of need. But John, even then, felt a prickle of unease, a growing suspicion that Jed's motives were far from altruistic. He noticed Jed's pointed questions, always subtly probing, always circling back to the ranch's finances, the current market value of their extensive herd, and, most disturbingly, the intricate details of his father's will. John's internal alarm bells rang louder with each visit, but his father, weakened by his illness and perhaps clinging to the comfort of familiar faces, simply saw Jed as a friendly presence. a familiar figure from their shared past. The trust his father extended, born of a lifetime of community bonds, felt misplaced and dangerous to John. A few months before his father finally passed away, John managed to secure a precious period of leave from his military duties, rushing home to be by his father's side. It was during this visit that his deepest fears about Jed were almost confirmed. He overheard Jed in a hushed, manipulative conversation, attempting to convince his ailing, fragile father to sell a specific section of the ranch. Jed's voice was smooth, persuasive, painting the land as worthless desert, an unproductive burden. He even claimed to have a buyer, a shadowy figure who would pay cash, no questions asked, ensuring a quick, discreet transaction. But John knew better. He knew this particular section of land bordered one of the most vital and valuable water sources in the entire region, an essential asset for any working ranch. The implications of Jed's proposal were clear. He was trying to swindle his father out of a crucial piece of their legacy. John immediately confronted Jed, his voice tight with suppressed anger. Jed, caught off guard, quickly backed down, his feigned innocence a thin veil over his transparent deception. Despite Jed's retreat, the incident served as a stark, final warning. His father, though frail and fading, had seen the predatory glint in Jed's eyes, the calculating greed that briefly flickered through his performance. He pulled John close, his voice weak but firm, imparting one of his last, most poignant pieces of wisdom. "Son," he'd whispered, his gaze steady and knowing, "you always gotta watch out for those who smile too much when you're down." It was a profound statement, a distillation of a lifetime of experience, and it resonated deeply with John. It was his father's final, unspoken plea to protect their heritage, a warning against the wolves in sheep's clothing. After his father's passing, the full extent of Jed's treachery began to unravel. As John painstakingly sorted through his father's personal papers, a painful and emotionally draining task, he stumbled upon a chilling discovery. Tucked away amongst legitimate documents was a crude, hastily drawn-up deed for that small, vital plot of land near the water source. It was clearly fraudulent, an amateurish attempt to trick his father into signing over the property. John realized then, with a cold clarity, that Jed had been actively trying to steal from his family, not just once, but repeatedly, preying on his father's good nature and his declining health. He had intercepted the attempt just in time, but the depth of Jed's malice was now undeniable. Despite the undeniable evidence of Jed's deceit, John, ever the man of honor, decided to try one last time to appeal to their shared history, to the fading embers of their childhood friendship. He drove to Jed's rundown, neglected ranch, a stark contrast to the thriving Miller property. He tried to reason with Jed, to offer a genuine path forward. He offered to help him find legitimate work, perhaps even suggesting he buy some of Jed's struggling cattle at a fair, generous price, hoping to provide a lifeline without enabling further dishonesty. But Jed, his face contorted into a sneer, just laughed in John's face. "You think you're hot stuff with your fancy uniform?" Jed taunted, his voice dripping with contempt. "This ranch is too big for one man now, John. Things are gonna change." It wasn't just a casual remark. It was a clear, unambiguous threat, a declaration of intent. John knew then, with absolute certainty, that diplomacy was over. Jed had crossed a line, not just against John, but against his father's memory, against the very legacy he had sworn to protect. There would be no more talking, no more reasoning. The time for action was drawing near. After Jed's open threat, the sneer on his face etched into John's memory, John didn't react outwardly. He simply nodded, a quiet, almost imperceptible resolve settling deep within him. The casual observer might have seen resignation, but for John, it was the calm before the storm, the moment a seasoned warrior transitions from diplomacy to strategy. The time for words was over. The time for action, cold and calculated, had begun. He started observing Jed's movements, a task made familiar by years of specialized training. John, with his Navy SEAL background, knew how to become invisible, how to blend into the landscape, how to watch without being seen. He began a methodical surveillance of Jed's dilapidated ranch, noting the beat-up pickup trucks' comings and goings. He meticulously logged the times Jed left his property, the routes he took into town, the places he frequented, and, most importantly, the people he associated with. He learned Jed's habits, looking for patterns, vulnerabilities, and any potential accomplices. His mind, trained for intelligence gathering, meticulously cataloged every detail, every deviation from the norm. Simultaneously, John began to fortify the Miller Ranch, but not in obvious, conspicuous ways that would tip off Jed. He understood the psychological aspect of deterrence, and his goal was to create an illusion of easy access while establishing an impenetrable defense. He installed hidden cameras, miniature lenses cleverly disguised within fence posts, under eaves, and among the dense foliage of mesquite trees, invisible to the casual eye. These weren't standard security cameras, they were military-grade, low-light capable, and networked directly to his encrypted devices. He then set up an intricate network of motion sensors strategically placed along the perimeter and near the corrals. These sensors didn't blare sirens. Instead, they triggered silent alarms that routed directly to his phone, providing instant, discreet notifications of any intrusion. He reinforced gates and locks, but with a deceptive touch. The new heavy-duty latches and bolts were painted to look old and rusted, the hinges deliberately left with a slight squeak, making them appear easily breached, ripe for the picking. He wanted Jed to believe the ranch was an easy target, a soft score, lulling him into a false sense of security. The illusion was key. The reality was an ironclad defense. Inside the main barn, John set up a small, discreet observation post. It was a carefully chosen spot, high in the rafters, offering a clear, unobstructed view of the corrals, the main access road, and the surrounding fields. From this vantage point, concealed by bales of hay and old tarpaulins, he could monitor the entire critical area without being seen, a silent sentinel in the heart of his territory. He brought up a cot, a cooler, and communication equipment, preparing for long, solitary watches. His old service rifle, a precision instrument he trusted with his life, was brought out from its secure case. He meticulously cleaned it, disassembling and reassembling it countless times, each action a ritual of preparation. He practiced his aim, not just at physical targets, but mentally rehearsing scenarios in the dead of night, visualizing every possible approach, every angle of engagement. He knew the ranch intimately, every dip, every rise, every shadow, and he used this knowledge to his advantage, planning fields of fire and escape routes for himself should the need arise. To further solidify the illusion of vulnerability, John began subtly spreading a rumor in town. Over coffee at the local diner or during quick trips to the feed store, he would casually mention his struggles to manage the ranch alone, hinting that he was often away in San Angelo or El Paso, dealing with paperwork issues related to his father's estate. He wanted Jed to feel confident that the ranch was understaffed, that the new owner was distracted and often absent, making it an even more enticing and seemingly risk-free target. The suspense built with each passing day. John's preparations were a slow, deliberate dance, like a hunter meticulously setting a complex trap. He knew Jed would come. It was no longer a question of if, but when. He spent nights awake, often in his hidden observation post, watching, waiting, his senses heightened, his mind a steel trap of strategy and patience. The vast West Texas night, once a source of comfort, now became his ally, a canvas for his silent, precise plan, a stage for the justice he knew was coming. The night was a canvas of deep indigo, punctuated by the sharp glint of starlight over the vast expanse of the Miller Ranch. A cold, dry wind whispered across the mesquite, carrying the scent of dust and distant cattle. In the faint, ethereal glow of the moon, two shadowy figures moved with practiced stealth toward the corrals, their movements precise, their intent predatory. Jed, his face a mask of grim determination, hefted the heavy bolt cutters. His accomplice, a hulking man named Ray, nodded, his eyes scanning the seemingly deserted ranch. This was it. The moment they had planned, the culmination of Jed's long-simmering resentment and greed. Jed positioned the cutters, the cold steel biting into the thick wire of the corral fence, ready to sever the last flimsy barrier between them and their ill-gotten gains. Just as the first strand of wire snapped under the pressure, a voice, calm and steady, yet resonant with an undeniable authority, cut through the night. It wasn't loud, but it seemed to echo in the vast silence, chilling Jed to the bone. "He's not," the voice stated, clear and unwavering. "But I am!" Jed froze, the bolt cutters still gripping the severed wire. His head snapped up, eyes darting frantically into the darkness. A flicker of recognition, then raw fear contorted his features. "Miller?" he rasped, his voice a strained whisper, a mix of disbelief and dawning terror. "What in the—" Before he could finish, a sharp, deafening crack split the air. It was the unmistakable report of a high-powered rifle, a sound that Jed knew intimately from years in the countryside, but never one directed at him. The shot was precise, not at Jed himself, but at the engine block of his beat-up pickup truck, parked discreetly 100 yards away. A sickening thud, followed by the metallic clang of shrapnel, confirmed the hit. The truck's engine sputtered violently, coughed once, and then died with a final, defeated wheeze. Simultaneously, a series of soft, almost imperceptible hisses emanated from the vehicle. John had spent hours earlier, under the cloak of darkness, strategically placing silent punctures in the tires, ensuring that escape, once Jed was discovered, would be impossible. Jed and Ray, their faces now pale with panic, instinctively tried to run, their initial bravado dissolving into desperate flight. But John's voice, now amplified by a hidden speaker, boomed across the corrals, echoing with an almost supernatural omnipresence. "Don't even think about it," he commanded, his tone devoid of emotion, cold as the night air. "You're surrounded. The sheriff is already on his way." Jed, his mind racing, suddenly saw a faint crimson glow dance briefly across his chest, a chillingly precise laser sight. He froze mid-stride, every instinct screaming at him to comply. This wasn't some amateur, this was someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Ray, however, dumber and fueled by a more primal, desperate fear, ignored the warning. He lowered his head and made a frantic dash for the fence line, hoping to scramble over and disappear into the darkness. Another shot rang out, impossibly quick, impossibly accurate. This one hit the dry, dusty ground directly in front of the fleeing man, kicking up a violent plume of red earth. Ray, startled by the near miss, tripped over his own feet, sprawling onto the ground with a grunt. He scrambled back toward Jed, his face a picture of abject terror, realizing the futility of escape. "Hands on your heads now!" John's voice sliced through the tension, sharper this time, leaving no room for defiance. "Lie on the ground, face down!" Jed, his shoulders slumping in defeat, knew he was completely outmatched, outmaneuvered, his carefully laid plans shattered by an unseen force. He slowly complied, his hands rising above his head, muttering curses under his breath, a stream of bitter, defeated expletives. Ray, shaking visibly, followed suit, collapsing onto the dirt. From the deep shadows of the main barn, John Miller emerged, his silhouette stark against the faint moonlight. The service rifle was held steady, an extension of his body, its barrel glinting faintly. There was no anger on his face, no triumph, only a cold, unwavering focus. The honed precision of a warrior who had anticipated this moment, prepared for it, and now executed his plan with flawless efficiency. He was not merely a rancher defending his property. He was a force of quiet, implacable justice. Then, faint at first, but growing steadily louder, the distant, mournful wail of a siren became audible, cutting through the vast silence of the Texas night. Jed's face, still pressed into the dirt, paled further. A look of pure, unadulterated dread settled upon him as the realization truly sank in. His plan had failed completely, utterly, and devastatingly. John had been waiting for him all along, a silent, patient predator, and now the consequences of his long-held malice were about to be delivered. For anyone watching, the satisfaction of seeing Jed's comeuppance was palpable, a moment of profound, vindicated justice under the vast Texas sky. The wail of the siren grew louder, culminating in a flash of red and blue lights as the sheriff's cruiser pulled up, kicking dust into the still night air. Sheriff Brody, a man whose weathered face held the wisdom of decades spent policing the vast stretches of West Texas, stepped out of his vehicle, his hand instinctively going to the sidearm on his hip. He took in the scene, Jed and Ray face down in the dirt, John Miller standing over them, rifle held steady, and the disabled truck in the distance. There was a quiet understanding in Brody's eyes. He knew John, and he knew the Miller Ranch. "Looks like you had some uninvited guests, John," Brody said, his voice calm, assessing the situation. John lowered his rifle slightly, though his posture remained alert. "They were just leaving, Sheriff. Decided to take a few of my steers with them on the way out." Jed and Ray were cuffed and read their rights without further incident. As the deputies secured the Rustlers, John calmly explained what had happened, detailing his preparations. He showed Sheriff Brody the precisely disabled truck, the cut wire of the corral, and then, with a click of a remote, displayed the crystal-clear footage from his hidden cameras on a small tablet. The video left no doubt, capturing Jed and Ray's every move, their attempt to cut the wire, and John's precise defensive actions. Brody nodded slowly, a grim satisfaction settling on his face. This wasn't just a simple arrest. It was a well-executed operation. News of the attempted rustling and John's quick, professional response spread like wildfire through Van Horn. The small town, usually quiet and slow-paced, buzzed with the story of the ex-Navy SEAL who had outsmarted and apprehended the rustlers who had plagued the area for months. The community, always tight-knit, rallied around John, offering help and support. Neighbors volunteered to mend fences, bring meals, and even stand watch. It was a powerful affirmation of the respect the Miller name still commanded. In the aftermath, legal proceedings moved swiftly. The evidence was irrefutable. Jed and Ray faced serious charges not just for the attempted rustling, but for a string of similar incidents that had plagued the county. Justice, as John had promised, came quicker than they expected. As part of the restitution and to cover damages and legal fees, a portion of Jed's family's struggling ranch was sold off. It was a somber end for a family that had once been neighbors, but it ensured that Jed faced real consequences for his actions. Not just this one, but for years of petty thefts and malicious intent. The remaining portion of Jed's ranch, now free from his destructive influence, was acquired by a young, honest ranching family from a neighboring county, meager to work the land with integrity and dedication. It was a new beginning for that land, a chance for it to flourish under honest hands. John, now firmly established as the new patriarch of the Miller Ranch, dedicated himself to its future. He understood that while tradition was important, progress was essential. He invested in modernizing some aspects of the operation, implementing new irrigation techniques, upgrading equipment, and exploring sustainable grazing practices. Yet, he always honored his father's traditions, ensuring that the heart and soul of the ranch, its connection to the land and its heritage, remained intact. He started a program to mentor young ranchers from the area, sharing not just his knowledge of cattle and land management, but also instilling in them the values his father had taught him: integrity, hard work, and a deep respect for the land and its creatures. He emphasized that true legacy wasn't something to be stolen or inherited without effort. It was something earned through sweat, honesty, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right. He taught them that the strength of a rancher wasn't just in their muscles, but in their character. Under John's care, the Miller Ranch thrived. The cattle were healthy and robust, the pastures green and well-tended. The land, once threatened by neglect and greed, now flourished, a testament to John's dedication. John often reflected on his extraordinary journey, from a young boy captivated by the rhythms of ranch life to a highly trained Navy SEAL serving his country with distinction, and now, back to his roots, guiding the destiny of his family's legacy. He had seen the world, faced dangers both foreign and domestic, but he had found his true purpose right where he started, amidst the vast, open spaces of West Texas. He understood that while the world might change, while technologies might advance, some fundamental truths remained constant: the enduring power of honor, the unbreakable bonds of family, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. These were the pillars upon which his life and the Miller Ranch were built. He stood at the fence line, looking out at the vast Texas landscape, the sun setting in a spectacular blaze of orange and purple, painting the endless sky. A gentle breeze rustled the mesquite trees, carrying the faint, comforting low of distant cattle. In that moment, he felt his father's presence, not as a haunting ghost, but as a guiding hand, a quiet approval. He knew he had protected his father's legacy, not just from rustlers like Jed, but from anyone who would seek to undermine its spirit and integrity. His future was now firmly rooted in the land, and it was built on solid ground, an enduring testament to resilience, vigilance, and the deep, unwavering love for home.